This conference will now be recorded.
Perfect. So thank you so much for joining us. I'm hoping that I'm able to answer some questions as this is a new process for us this year. So I'm going to go through a number of documents that are all available on our website as well, and I'll show you where those are located. But if you have any questions, we'll have time at the end to kind of go through those and make sure that you have what you need if you're thinking about submitting as part of this process with us. So a couple of years ago, the Fredericksburg Regional Continuum of Care thought about how to streamline our process for grant funding. And one thing that we do is every time that we come out with funding opportunities, our funding and performance committee does two things, and that's first figure out if the applicant is an even eligible applicant for the grant that we're talking about. And then second, whether or not we would fund and at what level for that particular grant funding. So in order to help with some of that process and streamline that for them, we talked about having an organizational review so that we could get the eligibility out of the way and really focus on the grant funding that we're particularly soliciting proposals for when the time comes. So each year we will open this process for any current and potential grantees. So if you are not a grantee with us right now, it's perfectly fine. We encourage new applicants, so we want to be able to tell you up front whether you're an eligible applicant or not, and then also help you with making sure that you're ready when a funding application does open up. So for this process, it pertains specifically to any funding that runs through the continuum of care. So the main ones for us are the Virginia Homeless Solutions Program. That is state funding that we are awarded each year. That is on a 2-year grant cycle. So the first year we will ask for new applicants. The second year we have to stick to the applicants that we have. And then again, we'll be able to solicit the following year for new ones. We also receive HUD funding, that's federal dollars through the CoC. That's through a CoC process for our applications. And then the Virginia Housing Trust Fund, that isn't necessarily an application that the CoC submits. However, there's a in-depth process for getting a support letter from us that shows that we are a part of your program process and that you're integrated into the CoC if you're administering those homeless reduction grant funds. So we have included that here. And then we do receive some local funds that the CoC administers on behalf of our membership. So if you would like to be considered for those, then you would also want to apply through this process. Just overall, eligible applicants have to be a member of the CoC, and they have to adhere to our coordinated entry policies and procedures. So those are on our website, and I will show you where those are. But basically, we're looking to make sure that you follow Housing First, which is a part of those, that you participate in our coordinated entry process, that you adhere to any project standards that the CoC sets for certain projects. So we have project standards for rapid rehousing and prevention right now, and then we are in the process of creating emergency shelter and permanent supportive housing. And then we do require, because most of our grants require this, that you use our HMIS system if you will be a grantee serving clients. And so that helps us with data collection and reporting to funders on client-based outcomes. And so for a majority of our data collection, those are requirements. If you are a domestic violence agency, then you are allowed to have a comparable database because of confidentiality and non-shared data, but you have to have one or the other. So that's the general requirements, and then obviously each funding round that comes out, there's specific things that they fund, things they don't fund. So you will have to meet the specifics of each funding that we're going for. So the timeline that we're looking at for this organizational review is that the organizational review documents are due by the 22nd, so you have a little bit of time to get those things together. From there, the Funding and Performance Committee will review all of your documents and give you a summary on whether or not you're eligible and any recommendations that they have for being eligible in the future if there are any issues. So even if you have eligibility requirement issues or there's things that the Funding and Performance Committee recommends, it does not disqualify you from being an applicant later on. The Funding and Performance Committee will just be looking to make sure that those things have been resolved before funding would be allocated to your agency. So for submitting documents, basically what we're looking for are these items here, which are pretty standard, I think, for most reviews of organizations, and they usually are required as part of our application processes. So we're looking for board of directors listing if you have one, an organizational chart, 990s, profit loss statements, some policies and procedures around your financials. And then the 2 for CoC is a spending plan, and that just looks at, so you have these programs where your other sources of funding coming from. That does not, again, affect your ability to have funding with us. We just kind of like to know kind of where your financial stability is for your programming. And then Housing First checklist, which is that Housing First piece for that general eligibility. We have been able to partner with the United Way. So if your agency has submitted documents to the United Way as part of their membership application, the United Way is able to help us with getting some of those documents for you, so that the number of things that you're actually submitting are limited to just the things that the United Way doesn't ask for and are particular to the CoC. And then we just ask that any documents that you do submit to us, just make sure they're in PDF form, and that I'm able to easily find what they are and who they go to as the funding performance reviews them. Finally, there is a appeals process. So if at any point you feel like your outcome or recommendations from the Funding and Performance Committee was biased or unjust, then we can go through the appeals process to make sure we have all the information for you guys. Again, this process does not exclude you from future funding. We will just be looking for some of the things that we have noted in your actual review. So this is the checklist that you'll be completing. Basically, it's just a list of all the things that we are looking for, so you can make sure that you have everything together. So the first thing is you're just certifying those 4 main areas that we talked about as general eligibility as part of our coordinated entry policies and procedures. We then want to know whether or not you actually submitted some of those documents so we can request those from the United Way. And then you actually have the listing of each of the documents. So if you have submitted these forms to the United Way as part of their process, then you only have to submit the last 3. And then if you haven't submitted as part of the United Way process, you'll just submit all of them to us. The Housing First checklist is a checklist that comes right from the United States Interagency Council on Homelessness. For your checklist, the only section that you have to complete, there is 2, the only section you have to complete is the program and project level section. I think the next section is community level, and you don't have to do that piece. So it's just about your agency, so we just want to, this is what Housing First means to us. We follow the council's kind of guidance here, so we are being really clear about what that means. And then final piece is the spending plan, which is a template that we have provided also on our website. So you'll actually choose what program you provide funding for. If it's not on this list, then you can click other and specify what that is, and then where that funding comes from. So we're just trying to get an idea about the stability of some of your projects and making sure that we're not your only funding source. Again, it doesn't disqualify you from applying for funding or us allocating funding to you. It just gives a better picture for the Funding and Performance Committee. So I'm going to share our website screen so you can see what that looks like. If you haven't been to our website, there is lots of information on there about all of our meetings and all of our processes. So this is a great place to start if you're ever looking for a document of ours. But on our screen, under our work, you'll find funding page. So anything funding related, you will find here. Our most recent policies and procedures are on here, and our policy priorities, which the board is currently working on updating for this year. But you will find the organizational review here. So there's links to all the templates and the checklist and anything that you need as part of your process in submitting these documents to us. You can submit all documents via email to me by the 22nd. I am also open to any questions at any time during the process if you have a question on anything. But that gives you a brief overview of us and the process. Does anyone have any questions so far? Like I said, it is a new process for us. So this is the first time that we're doing it. We'll see how it runs out. I have an idea in my head about what that looks like. And so again, it does not disqualify you. Anything in this process. We are always looking for new applicants and to diversify our grantee pool. So I encourage you, even if you're not sure if you'll apply, this is always a thing, you could always just mark it off already. So when the funding cycles come out, you don't have to do it later on. I think the grant cycles that you should be aware of that kind of follow right afterwards will be probably Housing Trust Fund and HUD will come out. We are in our second year of VHSP, so we will not be accepting new applicants this year, but we will for next year. So you should be set for that piece. Any last burning questions? Hey, Chris.
Hey, I got a few things, Sam,
Yeah.
and as you can imagine, we're not real happy with this, the Brisbane Center, because it basically cuts us out of the funding. We've been doing this since, we've been serving the homeless since 1987, which is 22 years before Housing First was even a thing. And we've always had support from the community. And so the people that we serve, the transitional and episodic homeless, as opposed to the chronically homeless, are not well served by Housing First. 1% of our clients get any kind of benefit from Housing First, and so it makes no sense for us to go down that road. When we were getting funding from HUD, we were getting 8% of our operating budget, and in fact, we were housing like 60% of the folks in the planning district. So it doesn't really serve us well. And we understand that, we've opted out of HUD funding because of that. But what concerns us is the fact that we're going to be locked out of housing trust funding and possibly jurisdictional funding. If you guys, if all the jurisdictions decide to, to contribute to you guys. So we're not real happy about that, of course. And there's nothing that we can do about that, of course. But Housing First is not, it's just one approach. There are other approaches that are actually valid as well. And I'll just put that out there. The strategic plan that we're required to submit, that's internal. That has stuff to do with like fundraising strategies. That's not public information. So for GWRC or COC to require that is just, it's meddling in internal affairs. That's for internal use. And, you know, we can, and I think that's what Dave did at that meeting the other day, is he created a version, you know, for public consumption, you know, which makes sense. We get that, you know, but some of the internal details are not for public consumption. You know, who do you plan to target for funds? That's not for public consumption. And then I have a question too, about your larger membership. I mean, we'd still like to work with the COC. But your larger membership, even the folks who don't get any funds, according to your bylaws, they have to adhere to Housing First, believe in Housing First, ascribe to Housing First as well. I don't know if everybody knows that. So I don't know, maybe you could clarify that piece. I guess I'm not really asking questions, I'm making statements, so I apologize for that.
No, that's okay. I think I understand kind of where your question is where is that coming from and what is the implications of that for others who may not be following that, I think is your question.
Well, I guess my statement is that we're unhappy with it, unfortunately. And so I guess I'm just registering our unhappiness with it. That's not news to you, I know. But the larger membership, you know, is a question that I have. You know, do folks know that they're required to ascribe to Housing First? You know, even just to, you know, be part of, I don't know, the 50-member agent, you know, as 50 members, however many members you have, do they all know that? They understand that?
So I don't believe that our bylaws has requirements of being a member. You are able to be a member if you're interested in ending and preventing homelessness. Housing First is not laid out as a requirement to be a member of the CoC.
Okay, I thought it was.
Out to be an eligible applicant for funding, but not for a membership of the CoC.
Okay, I'll have to reread the bylaws then. Maybe I read them wrong. So
yeah.
But thank you for that.
As for the strategic plan piece, I think whatever you submit as part of your strategic plan is fine. If that's not your internal document, if that's some public-facing document like Dave had shared already, I think that's fine. So whatever is able to be shared, I think we're just trying to get an idea about how, you know, the projects that you're funding, that we would be funding, fit into the overall goal of your organization and also, you know, the CoC as a whole. But I think that should be fine. And then as for cutting out of funding, at this point, I don't know that the localities have mentioned anything about changing the way that they do their funding process. I know that they still do their own application. They still make their own decisions. All of their funding still goes directly to the agency and not through the CoC. The only local funding that the CoC receives right now is a very small $10,000 grant for the Unsheltered Homelessness Initiative. All other funding for homeless services is done directly through that application process and has been in the past. As for Housing Trust Fund, the CoC support letter is a required piece for that application process. And so it even goes one step further. We have laid out in our policies and procedures, you'll see two different types of letters from the CoC. One's a support letter and one's an endorsement. And basically what the Housing Trust Fund process looks at is whether or not the CoC endorses your project. So they're a part of it, they're a part of the implementation There's a set of questions that they ask us to fill out. So it's a little bit different than you're a member in good standing, you participate, those kinds of things like we've written in the past for supporting projects. But it's actually, how is the CoC going to help with implementing this to success? So those housing trust fund projects go a little bit further. So that's why that's included here, is because the amount of involvement that the state is looking for from the CoC in those housing trust fund projects.
Okay, so the housing trust fund is a letter of support, you said? Did I hear that right?
So it's a endorsement letter, basically. So if you look in the
woman that I spoke with there said basically it's, that we're, a member in good standing is what she said.
Are you talking about housing trust fund, or are you talking about, I know that there was a recent application about,
It's formerly the VHDA. It's I don't know, Virginia Department of.
Yeah, so that's a separate pot.
Okay, gotcha. Okay.
The housing trust fund grants come from DHCD, not VHDA.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, can I ask you a question about the jurisdictional funding? Is that something that the CoC is going to try to have come through them, to be a umbrella organization to manage all those funds?
At this point, that's not something that we've even talked about.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. You can understand that that's important to us. That's a lot of our funding. So thanks for your letting me know that, your honesty.
Yeah.
So, okay. That's it. Thanks. I'm sorry if that was hard, but
No, that's fine. I'm happy to answer any questions. I mean, I think to your point, I think there are people who go a different route, and that's fine. And we want them as members of the CoC, and we see the value in collaborating and partnering with them. I think where we are limited and constrained is a lot of our funding follows very similar requirements. And so we totally see a place in our community in our efforts to end homelessness that may not be housing first. It's just not the things that we can fund, which makes it difficult for us.
I know we're in the same business. We work together, and it's just a little frustrating that we don't get any funding for it. But it is what it is, and I know it comes from the federal government, and there's nothing you guys can do about it. But it's just frustrating for us.
Did you have any other questions or comments?
Nope.
Okay. Anyone else have questions or comments? All right. Well, I am around if you guys have anything that comes up in the process of doing your checklists. So I'm probably best reached by email. If you reach out to me that way, I can get back to you. But thank you so much for joining us, and please continue to send any comments or questions that you have my way.
Thank you, Samantha.
Thanks.